Well, hello, hello, hello. Happy Monday. Happy Eclipse Day. Who saw the eclipse? I saw the eclipse. I wasn't planning on seeing it because it's one of those things where I'm like, it's just an eclipse, like whatever. And then about an hour beforehand, I go outside, and apparently I have a brand new neighbor that is moving in right next door to me, and she was sitting on the sidewalk with a friend, and she said, "I have an extra pair of glasses. Do you want a pair of glasses?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." The universe always provides. And so I did sit outside and watch the eclipse, and I did some very janky eclipse photography. It didn't go to totality where I was. It went to totality about if I had been up near where Porkfest is every year, it actually went like the path of totality was literally directly over the campground where Porkfest is held every year. So I was a couple hours south of that, but it was actually still pretty cool, man. I have to say, I wasn't expecting it to be as interesting as it was, but it's just like one of those things. It's like a wonder, right? So I basically I took this picture on my iPhone through the glasses to try, and this was about as good as it could get, which I still think was pretty good. But like, what was really interesting to me, and I didn't expect this, was it's actually a really warm day here. Like, my office is actually really effing hot right now, and it got so cold. And it was so weird. It gets to like this. It didn't go totally dark here, and I'm sure it would have been even weirder if it was like dark. But like it had this like weird kind of like twilight thing going on, but it got so cold. It went from being so warm to so cold within like like not like 10 minutes. And so I was like, yo, it's kind of like if you go to like a ski resort during like the off season or something where it's not like totally cold and snowy, but you're at like the base of the mountain, and then you get on the ski lift to go up to the top of the mountain to do some activity. And as you go up the ski lift, it gets colder and colder and colder. That was what it was like. But I actually thought it was pretty cool. It was a delightful experience, and I was pretty glad to do that. So I gotta be honest, guys, I'm kind of not feeling it today. I'm kind of like, I was looking at all these trainings that we could watch, and I was like, I just don't know I don't know what I want to watch. Like, nothing was striking my fancy. I went through like a lot of queer trainings. I was like, do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? I was like, do I really want to watch the same old queer training again for like the 87,000th time, or do I want to do something a little bit different? I feel like Mondays are like one of those days where you maybe just want to take it a little bit easier. I had a great weekend. Did anyone else have a good weekend? I was like, I got to chill out this weekend, man. I got to just like relax. I got some work done. I never there is never a day that goes by that I don't work on something because I'm a workaholic. It's just the way it goes. But it was just like chill, and I didn't have to worry about it. Is this actually happening? I don't think this is happening today. When is this happening? Because I don't think it's happening right now. Is it actually happening? Because Candace hasn't tweeted about it. Like, I thought it was something that they were going to coordinate. So my understanding of what this debate was, if it's happening right now, we can watch it right now. I don't really care. But like, my understanding of this debate was that they were going to coordinate a time for it that was not going to be today. And I haven't seen Ben post about it. I haven't seen Candace post about it. So I don't think it's right now. I think where they left it was that they were going to do it. Candace agreed to it, but they just couldn't do it today because Candace was in like England or something. So we'll see. We'll see. We will definitely be watching it when it happens. I just don't think it's happening right now. I have no indication to believe it's happening right now. So instead, what we're going to do is last week, a new person on the channel. And if the person who recommended this to me is here, please like raise your hand, give yourself a shout out. It was a relatively new person, and I was like I was like admonishing them for something, and I always feel bad when I admonish new people, but it's just like, you got to learn somehow, man. Like, you are diving into the deep end of the pool of socialism on this channel, and so if you come in and say something wrong, you're going to get admonished right quick. But after I admonished them, they said, Carlin, you should watch this Japanese Red Army thing because there's a video apparently in this playlist that's from a YouTube channel called Unseen Japan. And they said there's a there's a video in this playlist where they literally kill each other during a struggle session. And I was like, I want to watch that. I don't know anything about the Japanese Red Army. I don't know anything about this socialist thing that's sprung up in Japan. And so I thought, like, just to take it a little bit easy, we could watch maybe the first. Why does my throat always go as soon as I go live? I can talk normal all day long, and then as soon as I hit go live on StreamYard, my throat's like, you can't talk anymore, bitch. I'm like, what the hell was happening? I had a whole conversation earlier without my throat bothering me. Anyway, there we go. Hopefully, fingers crossed, my throat cooperates. So I thought we could watch a couple episodes of this and just see what's what and learn about the Japanese Red Army just for a nice break. Does that sound good to everyone? The first couple episodes will be about an hour. I don't think it was Kurt, Judy. Oh, by the way, shout out to Judy, because Judy, look what I got. You got to teach me how to use this, Judy. I have no idea how this works. You have to, like, but do you guys know what this is? Judy is now queen of the chat. Judy has an official queen of the chat designation. When you're king or queen of the chat, basically what that means is you can never be banned. Judy can say whatever she wants. She can do whatever she wants. She will never be permanently banned. I'm not saying she wouldn't get a timeout if she was really uppity, but I wouldn't expect that out of Judy. I don't think that is. Do you know what this is? This is a tool that allows me to do an I-cord bind off in knitting without having to do it. Like, it's a tool that does an I-cord bind off for me. Now, if you don't know what an I-cord bind off is, it is the most annoying effing bind off in the history of knitting. But it looks really cool. And so it's a pain in the ass to do. They take forever, and Judy has sent me this tool that will apparently do the I-cord bind off a lot faster and easier, and it's the best thing ever. This might be the best thing that's ever happened to me since Victor bought me an electric yarn winder for my yarn, so I didn't have to do it manually. Like, you know, I'm a simple girl, man. You buy me a tool where I can wind my yarn, or you send me a tool that does an I-cord bind off, I'm a happy girl. I don't need anything else. So thank you, Judy, for that. Indeed, there are rules in this chat, Murphy's Pool. Indeed, there are. There are 2 rules in this chat. Number 1, don't be a dick. Do not insult me. Do not insult anyone in the audience. I can do whatever I want because you're in my house. Number 2, no whining. If I ask you to stop doing something, just stop doing it. And Murphy's Pool likes to torture us with these pictures. Anyway. So I thought we would check out this Japanese Red Army thing and just see what's what about that. And so that's what we're going to do. But I got a couple things before I get started. Number 1, of course, please head over to my Substack, which is Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com, and signed up for the email newsletters. You can sign up for free, but if you want to support the work I'm doing and keep me in business, because I am 100% grassroots funded by you, please consider supporting my work with a subscription for $8 a month, $80 a year. I don't have any big donors. I don't have any big benefactors. My entire business model is on average people valuing what I'm doing, showing what the left is doing, breaking down the left in language that everyone can understand, giving you tools and resources that you can share out with your friends to teach people what's going on. Because the only way that we can possibly beat back the left is through a grassroots movement of ordinary people taking extraordinary action and teaching other people what is going on. God knows we cannot rely on the influencers to do it. And we got another example this morning. And shout out to Glimmerman. Check this out. We got another example this morning of why specifically we cannot trust the influencers to do their one and only job of informing their audiences What is going on? So, I have been trying to tell people for literally years that the goal of the left is to abolish capitalism, capitalism being specifically defined as private property ownership. Of course, for saying this, the thanks I have gotten is I have been smeared and defamed and ridiculed and been the target of multiple smear campaigns and all of this bullshit. And I have conservatives in my ear reeing all the time, they hate white people. Well, a funny thing happened very recently. Squatters' rights have been in the news. Now, squatters' rights are not a new thing. It's just one of those things that everyone's talking about. So now it's become fashionable to start talking about it. And Jack Posobiec has been tweeting about this on Twitter because, of course, Jack Posobiec will tweet about whatever he needs to in order to get attention because that is what Jack Posobiec does. And he's like, oh my God, communists want to abolish private property. They hate landlords. Why do communists hate landlords? We never could have seen this coming. Why do communists hate landlords? It must be because they're all white, right? He's been tweeting about this all morning. And I normally have Jack Posobiec blocked on Twitter because Jack Posobiec stole my journalism and took credit for it in order to sell books. Jack Posobiec stole my freaking when I went to the socialism conference, was the only person to go undercover at the socialism conference, got the president of the American Library Association on tape saying that libraries should be sites of socialist organizing. Jack Posobiec stole my journalism and used it with Kirk Cameron in order to sell books without crediting where it came from. Does anyone remember that? I remember that. I remember when someone with 2.5 million followers on Twitter stole my independent journalism that I paid to do myself based on people who support my work on the Substack. But no, in the conservative influencer sphere, we just can't give people credit for actually doing things that people like Jack Posobiec refuse to effing do. Yes, Kirk Cameron, the evangelical, because what they did is they took my Emily Drabinski clip and they combined it with a special offer to buy children's books to send to libraries to do the conservative reading program at the library. Because we can't allow libraries to be sites of socialist organizing. Anyway, so I usually have Jack Posobiec blocked on Twitter because, like, why wouldn't I? I mean, come on. But Jack Posobiec was tweeting about private property, and so I unblocked him for a brief moment. I will be blocking him again very soon. And as he was tweeting about this, I'm so proud of Glimmer. Glimmer has been following my content for years. Glimmer has been actively sharing my content on Twitter for a long time. Shout out to Glimmer. There is nothing I love more than when I see my audience replying to these jackass conservative influencers saying, no, Jack, they want to abolish all private property ownership because they want to abolish capitalism, Jack. So a completely correct statement, completely unequivocally correct. Jack Posobiec retweets Glimmer and his response, the educated conservative influencer sphere response to a 100% completely accurate statement is, no, they don't want to abolish capitalism. They don't want to abolish private property. They just want to kill people. It would be funny if it wasn't so sad. So we've got Jack Posobiec tweeting out a completely accurate statement. As of right now, almost 50,000 people have seen this. Glimmer is saying they want to abolish capitalism, Jack. That means they want to abolish private property. That's why they're going after landlords. That's why they're going after squatters' rights. And Jack Posobiec, the expert conservative that is featured all over conservative media and is literally responsible for informing millions of people what is going on, says, no, Glimmer, no, you are mistaken, probably because you are a woman and shouldn't be even engaging in this conversation anyway. No, they want to literally kill you. Yep, welcome to the land of retardia. Welcome to the land of retardia, folks. But this is why, guys, it's important that people sign up to fund what I'm doing, because I don't have an advertising budget. I don't have a marketing budget. I'm never going to be on any of these big shows because they know damn well if they bring me on, I'm going to say things that they don't want to hear. If my work, the real information that I'm the only one showing people this on the internet, if this stuff is going to get out there, I need your help to do it. Not only do I need people sharing the content, not only do I need people coming to the streams, mounting the like button, subscribing, doing all that stuff, but if you can afford to fund my work, please consider doing so. I've tried to keep it really affordable so everyone can do it. $8 a month, $80 a year. I really do appreciate it. My birthday's on Friday. So if you want to give me an awesome birthday present, the very best birthday present you could give me is by signing up for a membership on my Substack. I would really appreciate it. And the more memberships I have, the more independent journalism I'm able to do, the more undercover work I'm able to do, the more I'm actually starting to dedicate like a tiny, tiny, tiny little budget to like pushing Twitter ads to try to get more people involved with my work, because God knows if I don't do that, there is no other way it's going to get out there, because the conservative influencers just steal what I'm doing and take credit for it anyway. So I need your guys' help. I can't do it without you. Sign up for the Substack. And when you sign up as a member on my Substack, you will get a variety of perks. That includes 2 Zoom calls every single week with me. Our next one is at 7 p.m. tonight. So about 90 minutes from now. So definitely you have time to sign up and still come to our Zoom call at 7 p.m. The other one we do is on Wednesday at noon. We are doing a bitchcraft this weekend. That's on Saturday at 3 p.m. And guys, I have some very exciting news. We found the Gnostic sex cult. We found it. That Gnostic sex cult that James Lindsay has been screaming about and writing books about and all this stuff. We found the Gnostic sex cult. We didn't think it existed. But on Sunday night at 8 p.m. in my supporter Discord, where we do movie night every single Sunday at 8 p.m., we will be watching the movie about the Gnostic sex cult in my supporter Discord at 8 p.m. because it is my month of narcissism. My birthday is my month of narcissism. That means I get to pick out every single movie for movie night. And we watched Ender's Game last night and it was great. And the next movie we're going to watch is I cannot allow a month of narcissism to go by without really like scarring you guys in some way. So we are going to be watching one of my favorite movies. It is awesome. If you haven't seen it, Midsummer, all about a Gnostic sex cult, literally, in the supporter Discord at 8 p.m. And you get access to that when you join my Substack. Oh, you know what? The Wicker Man would be another good one to watch, Tom. That's a really good suggestion. We should make sure the Wicker Man is on that. We should definitely do that. So if you guys want to come and join us to watch the Gnostic sex cult movie Midsummer on Sunday at 8 p.m. and all future movie nights, which not everything is going to be emotionally scarring like Midsummer, head over to the Substack, sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year. No, it's an English bot. Don't worry about it. It's in English. It'll be fine. You know, I didn't think of it as a troll to James Lindsay when I picked it out. I was just like, I really like this movie Midsummer. But isn't it nice how it all works out that way? Another way you can support the work I'm doing is by heading over to the Unwoke art store and picking up some sweet merch to include the new limited edition April Unwoke wiki shirt, which it's springtime, so it has some flowers, but it still has all the angst. And this is a special limited edition shirt that I do, a different plague doctor every single month. And right now, even though it doesn't say it, all merch with this design is 25% off for the next week only. All this stuff is 25% off, even though it doesn't say it in the store right now because I didn't update it to say that. But it really is 25% off right now, and it's automatically added at checkout. So if you want to get one of these cool shirts, or a hoodie or stickers or this baseball shirt, you can head over to the store and get that. And it'll only be in the store until the end of the month. And there's all sorts of other sweet merch you can find when you're in there as well. All purchases do go to support the work I'm doing. And I do really appreciate it. That is unwokeart.com. All right. Do I have anything else? No. Let's get started. Guys, please mount the like button for me. Please subscribe on whatever platform you are watching on. And we're going to jump right in and we are going to learn about the Japanese Red Army. Shout out to Unseen Japan for putting these videos on the internet for us. We appreciate it. Let's see what's going on.
Forming a nationwide league of...
Start at the beginning.
It was the winter of 1972. The snow lay deep as 5 bedraggled men trudged their way up the slope towards the lodge. They had been walking for so long that the bone-weary ache of their legs had become like constant background noise amidst the silence of the falling snowflakes. Weary as they were, the prospect of being indoors with heating and real soft beds must have been appealing. Yet gazing up at the looming form of the building, oddly shaped with 2 rectangular lower floors and a triangular third that connected to the hillside like some strange arrow, these men knew that rest would not yet find them. The revolution could not rest, and neither could the soldiers of the United Red Army. Muta Yasuko, wife of the lodge caretaker, was busying herself with chores when the door to the lobby suddenly banged open. 5 men...
Oh God, no, I didn't mean to do that. Oh no. I messed it all up. Oh no. I forgot to look at super chats and now I messed up the entire stream. God damn it. Okay, hang on. Step 1.
Forming a nationwide league
of... Go back to this video and get where I was. Apologies. All right. Step 2. Read the super chats that I forgot to read. I apologize for not reading the super chats. Rottweiler says, did Jack Posobiec make some sort of Faustian bargain to sell his soul in exchange for becoming the dumbest man alive? It's not very nice, Rottweiler. That's not very nice. But maybe. I don't know. And then Naruto says, on the RCA official podcast that was launched over the weekend, wait, they talked about me? What did they say? Naruto, you can't leave me hanging on that. What did they say about me? The communists are talking about me on their podcast? Do you want to know why the communists are talking about me on their podcast? Because I'm the only fucking person covering them? Because everyone else who complains about communism all day, every day on the internet don't actually talk about real communists that are showing up in the real world? What did they say? We're gonna pause until I get an update. What did the commies say about me? Should we listen to it? I don't really want to give the communists more attention right now, though. What is the name of the podcast? Okay, but I don't have the Discord up right now. So what is the name of the podcast? Okay, if you guys want to listen to this, someone needs to tell me the name of the fucking podcast. I don't have the Discord up right now. You guys can keep saying it's in the Discord. I don't have the Discord up right now. So thank you, Sin. I appreciate it. Okay, I will go into the goddamn Discord and find it. The reason I don't have the Discord running is it takes a metric ton of fucking memory to run the Discord and when I'm running everything else. That is why I don't have the Discord running right now. Okay, I see a link saying they've launched a podcast, but is that the episode where they talked about me? Guys, if I ask you a specific question, like I need a specific answer, is the link in the Discord the episode where they talk about me? Okay. I don't see anyone. Well, okay, the link I see in the Discord bot, there's no timestamp that says that. So I'm not seeing this. This is not what is in front of me right now, which is why I'm asking, is this the episode where they talk about me? Because you guys are telling me something is there that is not there. They said, what? I was a Suicide Girls model? They fucking wish I was a Suicide Girls model. Okay. Okay, so this is the episode where they talk about me. Yeah, Sin, I couldn't find it either, which is why I'm asking for really specific. Guys, let me just be clear. Like, a lot of people like to send me things and a lot of people like to put links for things in different places. The problem is that when every single person is sending me an hour long, okay, but I'm not seeing. When everyone is sending me an hour-long thing in different places to watch, and everyone's telling me there's timestamps, I don't see the timestamps in the post that I'm looking at right now. Okay, about 7 minutes in, they talk about me. Okay. Well, we're just going to watch it. We're going to listen to this and we'll see what's what. But the reason I'm being uppity about this is because, listen, I know that everyone means well, but when every single person is sending me different links to different hours long podcasts in different places and saying, Carlin, you have to listen to this for reason X, Y, B, and Z, and there's no explanation, there's no timestamp there, and everyone is sending me different things, it is not possible for me to pay attention to everything. Okay? So if I'm asking a specific question, I need a specific answer, and we've already been arguing about this for like 5 fucking minutes. All right. We're going to fast forward to around 7 minutes into the podcast. Close enough.
In view of everyone coming out of the closet in a massive way. And I think that's actually the impact of the video. I think that's the reason it went viral, is because if you look at the video, I mean, it is quite striking to see a sea of red flags on the streets of the largest American city. And, you know, it's like, we are here. We're not hiding. We're communists. This is our, we're openly declaring our intention. I mean, that's the spirit of the RCA. That's what we're here to do. We're not hiding our intentions.
That's right. And right-wingers like Jordan Peterson retweeted it, which only helped us. Again, all these right-wing trolls start piling on, and it feeds the algorithm, and it really helped to get like a bump of submissions of people asking to join, donating to us, and so forth. And
so Jordan Peterson and all of the Jordan Peterson stans that were retweeting this video helped the communists, because instead of explaining what was going on and talking about it in an intelligent way, they did their typical, we're going to own the libs bullshit. They helped the Jordan Peterson helped these people.
And these right-wingers, I mean, some of them, like Jordan Peterson, they're a joke. They're just like clowns. But some of them, they see that we're serious. They see that we're a different
I'm not
kind of
a
party,
right-winger.
that we're not like the
I'm not
old,
on the right,
quote unquote, left. And even though they don't agree with us, they can't help but respect us to a certain point. Here's this right-wing anarcho-capitalist
I'm not a right winger,
blogger,
communist.
Harlan B.
There is a lot that I respect about what you guys do, and I'm not joking about that. I mean, listen, like
Mm.
you guys are gonna win because you are doing what's required to win. I have to give respect for the amount of hustle that you guys have. It's gone on for so long, and you don't give a fuck, and you just keep going. You know, you have to respect that, even if you don't agree on some level.
Thank you for that. And again, this just helps feed the enthusiasm and the basically like word of mouth starts happening, and people are talking about us. And we have a
Is that it?
comrade. He works in construction, and he's working on a job site in downtown Manhattan.
I'm a member of Local
All right, so that's basically it. All right, that was a lot of arguing for a whole lot of nothing, but thank you guys for letting me know. I do really appreciate it. Let's move on and go back to the Japanese Red Army.
Own weary ache of their legs had become like constant background noise amidst the silence of the falling snowflakes. Weary as they were, the prospect of being indoors with heating and real soft beds must have been appealing. Yet, gazing up at the looming form of the building, oddly shaped,
Was there actually more? Alexis is saying there was more. Was there more? They did mention me by name. They did in the clip I played. Was there more? Yes or no? No, there was not more. Okay, back to this.
with two rectangular lower floors and a triangular third that connected to the hillside like some strange arrow, these men knew that rest would not yet find them. The revolution could not rest, and neither could the soldiers of the United Red Army. Muta Yasuko, wife of the lodge caretaker, was busying herself with chores when the door to the lobby suddenly banged open. 5 men, their clothes tattered, marched in amidst the drifting flurries and freezing cold of the outdoors. What's more, the men held weapons. Shotguns, a rifle, and a pistol, unheard of for civilians in Japan. Before Yasuko could ask the men what they wanted, they were upon her. Yasuko was pushed down by the intruders, who tied her up and ordered her to keep quiet. Their stench was alarming, but she hardly noticed it amidst the sudden shock of the intrusion upon her daily life. The 5 men went about hurriedly checking each room of the lodge for occupants. No one else was present. In fact, Yasuko's husband was out on an excursion with 5 guests currently staying at the lodge, and had left Yasuko to hold down the fort. He would not return for some time. Yasuko looked on as the men began pulling up the tatami matting for floors and started using it to cover all the windows and doors. They next added to their barricade by pushing any and all heavy furniture up against potential openings. One of the men returned from the kitchen, reporting to the shaggy intruder who seemed to be in charge that the lodge had enough rice in stores to keep them fed for well over a week. It had been decided. Here was where the revolutionaries would make their last stand. They had electricity, food, warmth, and even television access, something that would prove useful as the news crews began to descend upon the scene. More than that, they had their guns and ammunition. Most importantly of all, they had the cause on their side. The intruders looked out from the cracks in their barricades as riot police they knew had been tracking them assembled outside, soon numbering in their thousands. The sleepy hillside was alive with the movement of helmeted policemen, and the skies with the whirring of helicopter blades as the media gathered. Amongst the milling riot police stood Yasuko's husband, anxious and heartsick. The siege of Asamo Sanso Lodge had begun. The shocking events of the siege, which would last for more than 10 days, would hold the people of Japan spellbound. And yet it was just the last action of a hunted crew of homegrown revolutionaries, the horrific truths of which would very soon come to light as the bodies of their murdered comrades were unearthed from the shallow, frozen graves in which they'd been interred. The same group of revolutionaries had already made worldwide headlines with their daring hijacking of a passenger plane to North Korea. And soon, the names by which they called themselves, the Red Army faction, the United Red Army, and most of all, the Japanese Red Army, would come to be synonymous with terror, not only in Japan, but throughout the entire world of the 1970s.
Does anyone in chat know anything about this? I'm just curious. Because I have no idea. This is the first I've actually heard of this. So yes, these are communists in Japan.
Konnichiwa, everyone, and welcome back to Unseen Japan. I'm Noah Oskow, and today we're at the threshold of a UJ First, a 5-part series on an entire era of Japanese history. We'll be following the sprawling but endlessly fascinating and honestly rather intense history of the Japanese Red Army, the Japanese terrorist group which startled the world in the 60s, 70s, and even as late as the 80s. I hope you'll enjoy coming along for this wild, often dark ride, and if you do, give us a like and subscribe for more, or even lend us some support over at our Patreon so the series can keep going. So without further ado, back to the tale of the JRE. The Marxist-Leninist Japanese Red Army came of age amidst the heady, chaotic years of the radical student movements of the 1960s. The group which first appeared on the world stage as the Red Army faction, and which at its greatest extent had as many as 1,000 core members, was the child of many mothers. Born from the near constant splintering that occurred within student leftist groups over disagreements regarding communist doctrine and what defined the right sort of revolutionary action. There are many things about the Japanese Red Army and the history of the Japanese leftist student movements that might surprise the modern observer. That Japan, now known for the intense political apathy of its citizens, and particularly among the young, once had a youth culture that was so passionate and motivated by progressive ideals that it mobilized hundreds of thousands of people to take to the streets, to occupy college campuses and storm government buildings, and to do battle with thousands of armored riot police.
So what I want us to be looking for as we're watching this is I want us to be like paying attention to like similarities that we can find with the United States. So if you happen to see something, let us know in the chat what you see. Oh, hang on. Rottweiler. I have heard, Dr. K, there is in fact the Communist Party of Japan right now trying to queer Japan's entertainment education. That's interesting. We'll have to look into that, Rottweiler. Maybe.
Seem almost incredible that the most extreme elements of this massive cultural movement also gave birth to a Japanese terrorist organization that would go on to commit heinous murder,
Are they
carry
like
out
the
politically
Weather
motivated
Underground?
massacres, take hundreds of hostages, and embarrass the governments of whole nations can seem even more unbelievable. The demonym Japanese has been about as far from synonymous with terror for decades now as that of any people on Earth. And yet, the Japanese Red Army was, in fact, very real. And the terror all began in the form of the Red Army faction. The origins of the student movements of the 1950s and 60s are found in the dramatic changes that occurred within Japanese society following the downfall of Imperial Japan at the end of World War II. The American occupation forces, headed by General Douglas MacArthur, set about democratizing Japan from almost the moment MacArthur's plane alighted at Atsugi Air Base in August of 1945. Japan, devastated both economically and morally by the war, was to be reshaped from what was essentially a military dictatorship, one with a culture centered around emperor worship and the state-sponsored Shinto religion, to one that was a functioning democracy, where human rights were enshrined and where the people would be free to organize and alter their society as they saw fit. Government of and for the people, not of and for the emperor. To this end, the Civil Rights Directive of October 4th, 1945, guaranteed the rights of freedom of speech, assembly, political activity, and religion. When Japanese lawmakers proved too reticent to write a constitution that reflected these ideals, MacArthur pushed through one of his own staff's design.
Well, I never thought we could do it. Once I heard him say he wants it by the end of the week, I was thinking in terms of a month or 6 weeks.
This was the opportunity that many people would really give their right arms for it.
No one had any constitutional expertise.
The most remarkable aspect of which is the famed Article 9. The article in question uniquely forbids Japan from possessing offensive military capabilities. Amazingly,
They
a
put that in
large
their
subsection of the
constitution?
Japanese population took to these
That seems like ill-considered and ill-advised to put that in your constitution, that you can't possess offensive capabilities. Okay.
forced changes, excited by the new freedoms offered them. Freedom was also something gained by those political prisoners who had long languished in imperial Japanese jails. Despite protests from Japanese officials, MacArthur freed all those whom the imperial government had considered ideologically dangerous. Japan's most influential leftist thinkers and activists were able to breathe the free air again for the first time in years. While MacArthur's occupational government shifted course from the onset of the Cold War, favoring setting up Japan as the bastion against communism, rather than a paragon of true democracy, the fuse had already been lit. Those who had become enamored with the new freedoms of the post-war years would now often be willing to fight for their rights to independence and to exercise political power. The Japanese Communist Party, which remains the largest non-ruling communist party in Asia, began to flourish as it never could have while outlawed by the previous regime, going from a pre-war membership of less than 1,000 to 150,000 by 1950. The major reason for the party's popularity was that it presented itself as decidedly reasonable compared to the revolutionary communist parties of other countries. American occupation officials were often surprised to find that the Japanese communists shared their democratic ideals more strongly than did the mainstream of the Japanese government. The occupational government also greatly altered the education system, ensuring that many more people would go to school than before and for many years longer. University education, once reserved only for the elite, suddenly became a major life goal for a much larger subsection of the population. The Japanese system we know today, wherein almost all of youth is spent in a stressful preparation for a series of school entrance exams on which the very future of an individual can hang, became prevalent in this era. Even worse, supply simply did not meet demand, and it has been estimated that in the early post-war period, only 1/5 of applicants were accepted to university in any given year. Entrance to university proved the first and perhaps only period of relief from continual life pressures. And yet the substandard nature of many underfunded and often still woefully war-damaged universities and the lack of meaningful interaction between faculty and students, as today classes were primarily lecture-based, left many young students feeling unfulfilled. Student self-governing movements arose in the post-war years to fill this void felt on campus, and a huge percentage of students found themselves involved with these groups. At the same time, MacArthur was encouraging the formation of unions and urging students to engage in free and unrestricted discussions of issues involving political, civil, and religious liberties, and to help call out ultranationalist imperialist teachers who still existed in the school system. The students of Japan did this, but did him one better as well, in 1948, forming a nationwide league of student self-governing associations, known as Zengakuden, short for the All-Japan League of Student Self-Government. The majority of the student leaders of Zengakuden, which shortly came to represent 60% of the student body in Japan, were firm followers of the Japanese Communist Party. Zengakuden and the JCP consequently became a major force behind the mass student movements that shook the nation in the years to come. Many students, infatuated with the promise of democracy offered by MacArthur's administration, were incensed by the rollbacks of the rights to protest during the Cold War. When, in 1949, the Ministry of Education tried to introduce a bill that would prohibit the use of universities for political congregation, Zengakuden led the students into the streets. 200,000 strong.
Wait.
The students and faculty.
They tried to prohibit the use of universities for political indoctrination? In 1949, the Ministry of Education tried to introduce a bill that would prohibit the use of university. Yo, can we do that here? Can we do that here? Who can do that here? Can someone introduce a bill demanding that no taxpayer-funded university is used for sites of political congregation? I think that would be a really good idea.
Into the streets, 200,000 strong. The students and faculty also came together to shut down hundreds of universities around the country. This incredible show of public opposition forced the government to scrap the bill. The student movement had found great success in its first ever action. Success was short-lived. The advancing Cold War and the increased radicalization of the JCP led to a series of red purges, with the government removing known communist professors from universities. Japanese youth, once enamored with American ideals, became horridly disillusioned with what they saw as the hypocrisy of Western democracy. As the Japanese government attempted to pass a draconian anti-subversive activities bill in 1952, 20,000 protesters converged
Hang on, we got a super chat from Tayton. Yuri Bezmenov said Japan would have been better if they had remained isolationists as they were before global trade to deter cultural rot. Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true. Thank you, Tayton. Appreciate it.
The Imperial Palace, battling baton-wielding police with hurled stones as they attempted to storm the royal residence. Thousands were injured and 2 students died in the attempt. The battle lines had been drawn, and the image of masked protesters armed with staves or even Molotov cocktails facing off against armored police would become an increasingly common one. The next decade and a half bore witness to incredible civic struggles as tens of thousands of impassioned youth faced off against police time and again over issues ranging from the Vietnam War to the controversial United States-Japan Joint Security Treaty, known as the AMPO Treaty, and the continued presence of American military bases throughout Japan. Students staged sit-ins on campuses across the country, shutting down education to such an extent that one year both matriculations and the acceptance of new students was called off entirely. Leftist students and farmers faced off against police in attempts to stave off the seizing of land for the construction of Narita Airport, now the main international airport in Japan. Students briefly occupied Tokyo's Shinjuku Station, which soon became the scene of frenzied fighting as scores of police moved in to remove the protesters. The famous Yasuda Hall of Tokyo University suffered the same fate when the police finally laid siege to the embattled student occupiers, who had held the building for 6 whole months. But not before famed hard-right author and right-wing student militia leader Mishima Yukio entered the hall for a now famous public debate with the students.
Oh, hang on.
As the years dragged on,
Hang on, I couldn't see what was being said.
Militia leader Mishima Yukio entered the hall for a now famous public debate with the students. As the years dragged on and the student movement became more frustrated, more and more cracks began to emerge in their unified front. First, the leaders of the Zengakuren broke from the JCP. The Communist Party had returned to moderation in order to re-enter mass politics. Then other groups broke from the Zengakuren itself over differences of doctrine.
See,
radicals consistently...
I just want to point this out. They just said that all this bullshit got started when the Communist Party returned and entered mass politics, right? I have heard from so many conservative influencers that they don't take this new revolutionary Communist Party seriously. And it's like, they're too small. They're not doing anything. It's stupid. It's like, bro, first of all, they're not as small as you think they are. They have an organized presence in 30 cities. They're using the unions to organize. They're using the workplaces to organize. They are recruiting massively on college campuses. They have at least doubled in size since August, and probably even more now from the last time that we heard from them. How do you think this stuff starts? How do people think that this starts? It starts with stuff like this. And then it all of a sudden blows up and people are like, we didn't know. No one told us. I was like, I fucking did tell you. I told you from the moment it happened. And you didn't want to listen. And you didn't want to tell other people. Because we're winning. We're winning. Conservatives are winning.
Saw the groups they were a part of as lacking in revolutionary zeal, leading to a near constant splintering of leftist groups. Not only this, but Japanese society, once supportive of the aims of the student movement, had turned away from the constant violence and chaos. By the late 1960s, being involved in a radical group was now enough to risk one's chance of future gainful employment, which was the whole point of university attendance in the eyes of Japanese society. This left only those who were willing to fully reject a place in that society within an ever-shrinking movement. It was this near constant distillation of radicalism that led to the creation of the Japanese Red Army in the waning years of Japan's New Left. The JCP begat Zengakuren, who in turn begat the Communist League, or the Kyosan Shugisha Dome, just one amongst dozens of ideological splinter groups. The Communist League then in turn begat the Red Army faction, which in turn begat the notorious United Red Army and the Japanese Red Army. It had all started during a 1969 meeting held by the Communist League for its leadership from universities around the country. The ideological heads of the organization were to engage in discussion regarding their current situation and the future of the movement. During the course of these meetings, however, there ensued a major split between the group from West Japan, including Osaka and Kyoto, and those from the East, which included Tokyo and Yokohama. Those from the West insisted that the New Left movement as it existed had failed. The people of Japan had rejected it. The police, many of whom were now mobilized in the form of specialized riot police called kidotai, had become too good at suppressing and preventing mass demonstration. From now on, it was time to try markedly more violent tactics to help spur on a true world revolution, as envisioned by the now long dead Leon Trotsky. A revolutionary army would have to be raised, which would
Bolsheviks?
rise up in armed revolt with guns and...
So they're Bolsheviks, just like the new Revolutionary Communist Party here. I didn't say Mao was going to do anything. I said, Dog Whistle Daniel, this might have been before you started watching, but go back and watch the content that we did about the new Revolutionary Communists of America Party. It has nothing to do with Mao. It's happening here right now. They just said that they were Bolsheviks. The new Revolutionary Communist Party here are Bolsheviks.
Bombs. The East Japan group balked at this and purged the more violent-oriented West Japan leadership from its organization. These purged aspects of the organization would later take a new name for themselves, the Red Army faction, or in Japanese, the Sekigunha. The leader and ideological master of the newly minted Red Army faction was one Shiomi Takaya, an avowed Trotskyite for whom violent international revolution was the goal. In Shiomi's eyes, any attempt at coexistence with the imperialist West, as was then being professed by Soviet Premier Khrushchev following his shocking repudiation of Stalinism, were a corruption of true Marxism. World revolution required unflinching action. Imperialism needed to be purged from the world, and Japan was the place to start. If they joined hands with other revolutionary forces in Cuba, Palestine, Korea, and Vietnam, soon the entire world might glow red. It was exactly this call for direct action that attracted people to the Red Army faction. As the name implied, joining the organization meant more than mere theorizing, demonstrating, debating over doctrine, or verbal posturing. It meant joining a battle for world revolution. Hundreds of youth from around Japan who hungered to actually fight for their ideals purchased red helmets and painted the kanji Sekigun for Red Army across them. They had now joined in the united global struggle. But that struggle first took the form of internecine battles with their parent organization, the Communist League. Hostages were taken and headquarters stormed. One Red Army soldier died after he slipped and fell from a high window while escaping being held hostage at the League headquarters at Nihon University. Death had become a part of the Red Army mythos from its very first days. Next, the Red Army faction planned a series of small attacks against the police around the country. These actions, planned following talks with the radical US-based Students for Democratic Society, were, in the usual grandiose language of Shiomi, called wars. The Tokyo War, the Osaka War, and so on. In reality, these amounted to mere skirmishes, as the police actively raided Red Army hideouts and prevented them from carrying out their larger plans.
Hang on. Liquid Marble says, I saw the comments section on an RCA video. Hang on. I saw the comment section on the Revolutionary Communists of America video a while back. They're filled with comments from all over the world. There are communists all over the world. That's true, Liquid Marble, because the Revolutionary Communist Party is not just in America. It's an internationally coordinated effort where they are launching these new communist parties in other countries all over the world. Minimally, we know they've launched one in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Sweden, and Switzerland, and there are probably other countries that they've launched them in as well.
But larger plans they did indeed have. Xiaomi and his lieutenants hatched one plan to raid the Prime Minister's residence, hoping to take the country's leader hostage in order to halt the planned meeting with President Nixon for the finalizing of the return of Okinawa to Japan. The continued presence of the American military in Okinawa after the handover incensed the radicals. A training camp for as many soldiers as would join was set up in anticipation of this daring action, and the setting of the remote mountains of the Daibosatsu Pass in Yamanashi Prefecture was decided upon. Dozens of volunteers converged on the inn at the Daibosatsu Pass, where they engaged in training on how to build peace bombs. These were incendiary devices invented by a Red Army research team made up of chemistry, physics, and medical students that used dynamite packed with pachinko balls, and a fuse stuffed into the metal containers used by Peace brand cigarettes. The progress of the training camp, however, was rudely interrupted in the early morning of November 4th, 1970, as 300 police armed with billy clubs and riot shields descended on the sleeping activists. 53 radicals whose ages ranged from 15 to 26 were arrested, and knives, pipe bombs, and the plans for the assault on Prime Minister Sato's residence were all discovered at the scene. While Xiaomi himself was not among those captured, he was found and arrested shortly thereafter. He would never have full control of his movement again. A major blow had been dealt. Ironically, the discovered materials revealed that the Red Army faction had functioned on a hierarchical structure that was anything but revolutionary. Those from the most elite universities, such as Tokyo or Meiji, were selected for the highest levels of authority. Secondary authority went to those from major public universities, with the next level being local establishments. Those without a college education, or those who were in vocational school or high school, were the grunts of the organization. This seemed a far cry from a just revolution of the proletariat. The Japanese police had become increasingly skilled at detecting and stopping violent radical action. Diligent sleuthing and the trailing of activists had led them to the training grounds of Daibosatsu. They had shattered the leadership of the Red Army faction, even capturing Xiaomi's second-in-command as the youth visited his girlfriend. The rudderless organization, which had once held debates and made announcements in public auditoriums, watched over by hundreds of police, had no choice but to go underground. They now engaged in much more secretive activity. This was often carried out by individual cells which received their marching orders from a complex network of timed calls to public phones and messages passed between activists' girlfriends who held quiet meetings at public cafes. The new and untested leadership of the Red Army faction now knew they needed to do something impactful for the revolution. First, however, funds would be needed. The Red Army sent forth members to carry out brazen, well-planned bank robberies. Fleeing to train stations and switching between multiple lines, the robbers would disappear into hideouts in the vastness of Tokyo with their ill-gotten funds. Later, when the police were seen to be getting too close to discovering any individual hideout, the Red Army would close out their rental agreements, leaving behind pristine apartments whose landlords would never suspect that their tenants had been dangerous revolutionaries. Xiaomi and others in prison actually looked down on these robberies. They saw the theft of money from normal people as counter-revolutionary, and yet the police pressure that had pushed the group underground also ensured that they no longer had the means of sitting around and discussing such questions of doctrine. All that these isolated cells had were orders and action, and the most stunning of these actions lay directly before them. It happened just as the plane was soaring into the skies above Mount Fuji. It was March 30th, 1970, and the regularly scheduled JAL flight between Tokyo and Fukuoka had just recently reached cruising altitude. The The seatbelt signs had just blinked off, and stewardesses began to walk down the aisle offering oshibori, moist towelettes, to the passengers. Just as this all occurred, 9 business suit-clad young men sitting towards the front and back of the cabin picked up their long, tubular carry-ons from beneath their seats. These tubes, like those used to carry fishing rods, contained something much more dangerous. They suddenly pulled out samurai swords and pipe bombs from their baggage as their leader yelled out to the assembled.
Can you imagine a reality in which you can literally get on a plane with a samurai sword? Like, but like, set aside the pipe bomb thing. Like, they allowed samurai swords on airplanes. I know it's not funny. It's not funny, but it is funny, isn't it? Oh god, the 70s when they allowed samurai swords on airplanes.
Passengers, raise your hands. We're going to North Korea. Thus
What?
began Japan's first ever hijacking of a commercial flight.
They hijacked a plane to go to North Korea? Wow.
Amongst the 5 hijackers was one Wakabayashi Moriaki, original bassist for the psychedelic rock band Radicalized. If I'm mispronouncing the name of this band, that's okay, because Radicalized is not a real French word. Radicalized was formed by Doshinsha University student Mizutani Takashi, himself a radical and a French literature and sociology major. The band, obscure when the hijacking occurred, has since gained an ever-increasing sort of cult fame, in no small part because of Wakabayashi's participation in the hijacking. 4 of these Red Army faction soldiers stormed into the cockpit and, pointing their swords at the pilot and co-pilot, demanded to be taken to North Korea. They promised that the 154 passengers on board the flight would have their safety guaranteed, so long as the pilot acquiesced. That pilot in question, named Ishida Shinji, a former officer in the Imperial Army, weighed his decision. The lives of so many depended on what he did now. Using some quick thinking, he insisted that the plane did not have enough fuel to reach North Korea. Rather, it would have to land as scheduled in Fukuoka and refuel. The wary Red Army faction hijackers took the bait. 300 police, many disguised as airport engineers, waited on the tarmac as the hijacked plane made its descent. The government was scrambling for a way to solve the situation.
Hey, you got on a plane without a boarding pass? Oh my god. Pre-9/11 air travel was so different than what it is now.
Nothing like this had ever happened before in Japan. A media frenzy was already underway and a military plane had already arrived. The hijackers, made anxious by the numerous people on the tarmac, ordered the crowds away and ignored all attempts at persuasion aimed at getting them to deplane. Reticently, the airport workers began refueling the plane. After the hijackers released 23 of the women, children, and elderly on the plane, whom they worried would not fare well if forced into detention in North Korea, Ishida initiated takeoff towards the Korean peninsula, flanked by 2 military planes that stayed with them until they had left Japanese airspace. The pilot received navigational instructions over the radio from a source claiming to be Pyongyang, North Korea. As he landed the plane, the Korean tarmac was abuzz with soldiers in North Korean uniform. There were even some women in traditional Korean garb walking about. And yet, the pilot noticed one thing that mystified him. A plane sitting near the terminal with the tail markings of the now defunct Northwest Airlines. The hijackers, first jubilant at what they saw as the amazing success to their operation, were preparing to deplane as they too noticed something awry. Where were the North Korean flags? Suddenly suspicious, they refused to let anyone leave the plane before the airport officials would first show them a large portrait of Kim Il-sung. But none such existed. The plane had secretly been directed by the South Korean government to land in Seoul. The jig was up. The hijackers refused to release any of their passengers who, having been contained in a cramped airplane for 79 hours, were beginning to show real signs of fatigue. Although they would in fact later claim to have been treated kindly by the hijackers, One American later said that Japan Airlines would do well to offer them jobs as flight attendants. The negotiations dragged on for hours more, until a deal was finally reached. The Japanese Vice Minister for Transportation, Yamamura Shinjiro, would be flown to Seoul in exchange for the passengers. Then, the plane would depart for North Korea with only the crew, hijackers, and their single valuable political prisoner. As the plane finally arrived in Pyongyang, it was clear that the Red Army faction had just pulled off something the likes of which had never been seen in Japan. Their name would forever be emblazoned upon the history of the Japanese radical left, and those who supported their actions would now flock to their banner. And yet, not all had in fact gone as planned. While the planning of the hijacking itself had been done to send a message to the world, and to provide the Red Army faction members with a way to receive real revolutionary training by the experienced North Koreans, the North Korean government had other ideas. While the crew of the plane and Vice Minister Yamamura would soon be released back to Japan, the 9 Red Army faction members would not see Japan again for many decades. In fact, some would never see it again at all. The North Korean government took it upon itself to re-educate the hijackers on the ways of proper revolution.
Really?
Then kept them in the country, using them for the purpose of crafting Japanese language propaganda. Some were eventually sent on missions abroad for the North Korean intelligence service, the NKIS.
What are the ways of proper revolution?
Others have since been arrested in Japan, having entered with fake passports. Others died while still among their Korean revolutionary brothers. Others remain there to this day, not allowed to leave. One of these now stranded hijackers, the 27-year-old Tamiya Takamaro, had been among the most important leaders of the Red Army faction following the arrest of Shiomi. His loss would be keenly felt by the movement, as well as by a woman with whom...
This is a really good point Tayton is making. Like, the reason they were re-educated is that communist countries don't want revolutionaries. They want people who are going to fall in line and do what they want them to do. It's kind of like, I'm about to make an awful analogy, but I'm going to make it anyway. It's kind of like workplaces, and I say this as an organizational psychologist, like, employees think that workplaces want employees that are going to go above and beyond, or good, I should say this differently. Good employees, like high value employees, think that workplaces want employees that are going to go above and beyond, and they're going to be innovative, and they're going to be like on like the, cutting edge of things and all this stuff. But workplaces just want people who are going to follow orders. In fact, oftentimes the people who are trying to like go above and beyond, they're actually the first people to get fired because they rock the boat too much in the workplace. And so it actually can be a detriment rather than like something that workplaces are going to be considering valuable. And I feel like the same thing is true with like communist revolutionaries. Like, if you're so motivated that you're hijacking a plane, because I think we can all agree that was a pretty high level of motivation, right? Like, that's not going to be something that's going to fit into a communist system, because you have to become a cog in a machine. You can't be like a leader, because they don't want people who are going to be leading. They don't want people who are going to be doing anything that's unpredictable at all. They want people who are going to fit as a good cog in the machine into the system.
He had been very close. One Shigenobu Fusako, who would go on to lead terroristic actions that would make the hijacking of Japan Airlines Flight 351 seem tame in comparison. The leadership vacuum and increased police scrutiny following the national embarrassment that was the hijacking of Japan Airlines Flight 351, known in Japan as the Yodogo Hijaku Jiken, would bring about some extreme changes to the Red Army faction. Under the leadership of one Mori Tsuneo, the group would join with another violent radical group to form something new, the United Red Army. The growing pains of this new organization would lead to truly horrific violence, the like of which would shock Japan, and which would lead directly to the standoff at that snowy lodge in Nagano Prefecture. The United Red Army was not to be the only progeny of the Red Army faction, soon to be counted among the infamous, however. Shigenobu Fusako would shortly lead her own group out of the suffocating atmosphere of Japan to lands where she could more easily carry out the actions she thought would most quickly bring about world revolution. As the violence of the United Red Army would shock Japan, so too would Shigenobu's actions soon shock the entire world, as perhaps no Japanese group has done in modern times.
All right, that's the first episode. Next. God damn it, how do I keep screwing this up? How do I keep screwing up actually playing a video on YouTube? Like, I make a living on YouTube and I can't, like, hit the right button. Okay, apparently this is the video where they're going to talk about the struggle sessions in which people literally die. Now, I just want to do a quick time check. We're only going to watch one more because I have a community Zoom call that we're going to do at 7 p.m. So we're only doing the first 2 episodes today, and we're going to kind of get our, like, we're going to whet our appetites a little bit, and we're going to see if we want to come back to it. But it's just a casual day, guys. We're learning about the Japanese Red Army, like the Japanese socialists from the 70s, from a YouTube channel called Unseen Japan. If this floats your boat, they've got a whole playlist of these videos, so I would definitely recommend people go over there and watch. But this is just, I'm educating myself on this because I don't know anything about it, and you guys are coming along for the ride. Please mount the like button for me if you feel so inclined. Please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. I do stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. and we do socialism on Saturday at 6 p.m. Yeah, he's okay. He's all right. I did a thing with him and Andrew Gold a while back. I don't know about him. Anyway. Oh, and just as a reminder, like, one of the things that I really want to be thinking about as we're watching this is, like, any kind of parallels that you see between this and what's happening in America, let us know in the chat.
They found the bodies in the snowy foothills of the Japanese Alps. The police had already been tracking the revolutionaries for some time, as the radical leftist group now known as the United Red Army had hijacked Japan Airlines Flight 351, and with an important government hostage in tow had managed to divert the plane to North Korea. They had emerged as Japan's public enemy number 1. Internationally embarrassed by their inability to stop the hijacking, the national police had redoubled their focus on the underground group. Months of hard work had finally led the police here, deep into the snowy mountains of Gunma Prefecture. Days spent trudging through the snowdrifts after rumor and speculation had proved fruitful. They'd managed to discover the URA's remote and recently abandoned hideouts. All clues indicated some 30 people had lived here very recently. But they also pointed to something far darker, as the police continued tracking the fleeing revolutionaries, eventually catching up with them in the mountains near Karuizawa, Nagano Prefecture, for what would become one of Japan's most shocking hostage situations. The detectives examining the scene at the abandoned inn began to recognize the telltale signs of acts of violence. They found shreds of clothing that had been cut off of various people, a common method for removing the garb of those for whom rigor mortis had set in, making the usual removal of clothing nearly impossible. Staining on the ripped garments also demonstrated that the clothing had likely been worn in the last moments of the wearers' lives. Lastly, a large quantity of personal items and baggage mysteriously remained, including the sorts of hiking backpacks that those fleeing the inn would likely have taken with them. To the detectives, it seemed more than clear. Murder had taken place amongst the revolutionaries of the United Red Army. And yet, where were the bodies?
To be really clear, I am not planning on venturing out into foreign communist movements. This is just a one-day thing because I heard that they were doing struggle sessions in which they were killing each other. That's really all my interest is in this, to be honest. So I'm not branching outside of the United States. There's more than enough to do in the United States.
It all came to light in the days that followed as the police ensnared and captured the various fleeing URA soldiers. While the leadership remained tight-lipped, some of the rank and file among the arrested began to tell of the horrors that had occurred at that inn, horrors that they themselves had participated in. The location of the 12 bodies, the former comrades and now victims of the surviving URA members, was revealed. Police and news crews amassed on the sites of the various cold, shallow graves spread across the foothills near the cabin in Gunma. Images of the beaten and mutilated dead proliferated throughout a Japan already shocked by the 10-day-long standoff with the police just recently engaged in by 5 of the members of the URA. These pictures would disturb the Japanese public like few murder cases ever have. They would also spell the end for
Where are the
public support in
bodies?
Japan for the once inspirational mass student movements of the 1950s
Oh.
and 60s.
Okay, so all we need to do, guys, all we need to do is to get the communists in the United States to brutally murder several of their own in a struggle session, and then get the pictures of the mutilated bodies on the all over the media, and then everyone in the United States will turn against communism. Okay, are you ready? We can totally do this. I feel like they want to go after someone. We just need to, like, this is like where we need to just trigger them into just like eating their own. And it's not like we're not killing anyone or anything. We're just like putting them in conditions where they're going to be more inclined to exercise their inner urges and just letting them do it's like a cult sacrifice. It's a sacrifice for the greater good. If we can get the communists to murder, yes, in this case, I don't advocate for violence. I don't believe in violence, but I'm just saying that if we can trigger the communists into murdering some of their own in particularly gruesome fashion, it seemed to work in Japan to turn everyone off from them. It's one way to do it. I mean, they're communists to begin with, so it's like, again, I don't believe in violence. I'm not advocating the murder. I'm really not. Like, I don't believe in murder, but like, if they're going to do it anyway, oh, that's a good point. They're not close to murdering their own. They're really not. They're not anywhere near murdering their own. It would like this would have to be like a focused God damn it, Gloria, you're right. Yeah, but they don't believe in violence towards each other. They believe in violence towards the bourgeois, not towards each other. But you never know what's going to happen in a struggle session. A struggle session can really rile people up. So maybe we just need to like really focus on like the struggle session of all struggle sessions. I don't know.
皆様、資源の分社という女性をご存知でしょうか。太陽空港事件の黒幕ではないかと言われ。
Hello, Mina, and welcome back to Unseen Japan. I'm Noah Oskow, and today we'll be continuing on our journey down the dark, winding paths of the Japanese Red Army. This is part 2 in what will be at least a 5-part series, and while you don't need to have seen the first episode, which focuses on the Red Army faction and the hijacking of the Yodogo flight, it does add some real context. You can check that one out by clicking right here. A little warning, this is a darker episode than what came before. And while I won't get into terribly gruesome detail, the topic does go to shocking places. As always, if you like what we're doing here, give us a like and subscribe for more, and maybe even lend us some assistance over at Patreon. Just like the first episode, the subject matter will almost certainly mean this video can't be properly monetized. So we're relying fully on Patreon for this one, even more than usual. Speaking of which, we'll be answering an interesting question from a patron during the credits, so stick around for that. Alright, let's return to the early 1970s and to the Japanese Red Army. So as we discussed in the previous video on the series, a highly radicalized and action-oriented student leftist revolutionary organization called the Red Army Faction came into existence in 1969 during the waning years of the Japanese New Left. The turbulent post-war years had seen huge changes occur within Japanese society, including a great opening up of political freedom and the mass expansion of higher education. The Communist Party of Japan also came into the light in this period unshackled from its formerly illegal status under the imperial system. Its leaders able to breathe the free air for the first time in years. The youth of Japan embraced their new freedoms and then balked as the environment of the emergent Cold War caused those freedoms to retract, especially as the US-led occupation forces began to crack down on communist university professors during the first...
Well, this is a good point. Perhaps we could cause a struggle session between the Bolsheviks and the queer Marxists. Because the Bolsheviks don't understand the queer Marxists, and the queer Marxists are going to try to co-opt the Bolsheviks. The queer Marxists would be really good at struggle sessioning people. The queer Marxists are all on testosterone or estrogen, but mostly testosterone. So, like, I mean, there's something to be said for the fact that a lot of these mass shooters lately have been queer Marxists, you know? Peyton said, did you see the Vatican disavowing gender theory and surrogacy? It's too bad their church is infiltrated already. Yeah, I saw something about that, but like, it's already too late for the Catholic Church. Catholic Church is effed. Just a matter of time.
First of a series of red purges. Students and teachers took to the streets in their hundreds of thousands, shutting down university campuses countrywide in protest. Government buildings were also stormed. Initial success via mass demonstration gave way under the repressive tactics of a more hardened government who mounted a riot police force known as the Ecllipse, specifically trained to deal with protester violence. Clashes with police intensified as the New Left, made up of students angry at the overly moderate Japanese Communist Party, decided to take their fight for the soul of Japan into the streets. The New Left movement managed to mobilize huge numbers of people in protest against the Japan-US Security Treaty, known as the Ampo Treaty, as well as on other issues where the Japanese government was either seen as kowtowing to imperialist powers or was abrogating the new rights that had been granted the Japanese people by the post-war constitution. While the movement did generate some major successes via peaceful mass demonstration, some key failures, such as the passage of the Japan-US Security Treaty by Japanese parliament despite mass public opposition, led elements of the New Left to cast about for a more impactful way to effect change. The use of violence as a political tactic escalated. The Red Army faction emerged from amongst the now constantly splintering leftist groups and was made up of a wide subsection of Japanese student youth from across the country. The faction engaged in daring robberies, attacking police, engineering bombings, and finally carried out their most audacious act of all, the hijacking of a commercial airliner to North Korea, the first incident of its type in Japanese history. The hijacking appeared a major success, bringing the Red Army faction incredible notoriety. It also ensured an intense clampdown by police on any activity by the group, forcing them more deeply underground. At times, 2 to 3 plainclothes policemen would be spotted trailing a single activist. And with arrests and the virtual imprisonment faced by the hijackers now stranded in North Korea, all this whittled away at the leadership of the Red Army faction, which began to cast about for a new way to retain relevance and continue to fight for world revolution. The choices made by the new leadership of this critical juncture would lead the group down a dark pathway towards devastation and eternal infamy within Japan. This power vacuum left one Mori Tsuneo in de facto charge of the Red Army faction. No master of communist doctrine, as had been the now arrested founder Shiomi, nor of action, nor even a particularly inspiring figure, Mori's rise to the top created some friction amongst the Red Army soldiers now beneath him. Mori had been with the army for 2 years at this point and had worked his way up fastidiously from mere soldier towards the top. As the original leadership of the Red Army was unceremoniously scraped away by the police and North Korean government, Mori found himself thrust into the highest echelons of the organization. Mori had become radicalized while working a student job at Osaka City College.
A
The
student
cooperative
job.
he worked at was heavily affiliated with communist student groups.
Yep.
He befriended a co-worker named Tamiya Takamaro, who would eventually
Oh, wow. The co-op that he worked at was heavily affiliated with communist student groups. Imagine my shock. That never happens in the United States. Never.
mastermind the Yodogo hijacking. The two became nearly inseparable, and Mori was seen hovering around Tamiya at all times. When the movement got underway to halt the construction of Narita Airport and the compulsory seizing of land that would go with it, Mori left the Red Army faction's antecedent, the Communist League, to join the fight. Although thousands of students and local farmers were mobilized in what became a literal battle, they were eventually beaten back and the construction of the now famous international airport proceeded. Mori, perhaps disheartened, left the radical movement for an everyday factory job. There he might have stayed if not for his friend Tamiya searching him out and begging him to return to activism. Shiomi Takaya, the founder and leader of the new Red Army faction, was at first against letting someone who had abandoned the movement into his organization, but Tamiya convinced him of Mori's value. It was a fateful decision. But as 1970 dawned, Shiomi had been imprisoned and Mori's best friend and supporter, Tamiya, had disappeared into the totalitarian ether of North Korea following his daring hijacking. Mori suddenly found himself in charge of the most wanted revolutionary group in all of Japan. He first dealt with this by burrowing the group deeper underground. organizing secret cells of operatives who would
You know, communists in the United States don't even have to operate underground. Like, they put all their stuff on the internet. This is how we know what they're doing. They put all their events on the internet. They put all their videos on the internet. They do everything publicly on the internet. They do all their organizing on the internet. It's not even that hard to get into their private calls if we really wanted to. Like, why can't we create an environment in the United States where communists have to operate actually underground? Where I can't just do a fucking search on YouTube or Google or Twitter and all of their stuff comes right up.
carry out bank robberies and bombings based upon orders delivered from leadership they would never see. Mori also deviated from Shiomi's internationalist ideals by deciding to focus the Red Army faction's activities purely in the domestic sphere rather than on overseas outreach. The turn from Trotskyite internationalism angered some of the faction. This aspect of their doctrine was something that had always set them apart from other radical groups. They were supposed to be part of a worldwide revolution, fighting in tandem with their brothers and sisters across the globe.
They turned away
Petty
from the
bank
Trotskyites.
robberies and myopic views of revolution didn't really mesh with these ideals. One Red Army faction operative perceived Mori's top-down leadership and Japan-centric ideological style as especially offensive. Shigenobu Fusako, a young woman from Tokyo with a fiery sense of radical justice, found herself unable to sit idly by while Mori veered from the organization's original internationalist course. Shigenobu had in fact been romantically involved with Tamiya, Mori's now absent great friend, and she seems to have felt that Mori was not worthy of taking his place in the leadership. Not only that, but the entire Japanese leftist movement seemed to be faltering in the claustrophobic atmosphere of intensified police surveillance. Shigenobu decided that in order to ensure a continuing place in world revolution, the Red Army needed to leave for friendlier shores. Mori, never meeting with Shigenobu directly, sent messages denying her right to take aspects of the organization abroad. Shigenobu countered that he could either let her carry out her plans, or she would simply leave the organizational name behind and form an entirely new group once she was overseas. Cowed, Mori finally assented. Shigenobu married the younger brother of one of the Yodogo hijackers, and managed with the new last name that came with the marriage to avoid governmental scrutiny and get a passport to travel abroad. Her final destination was to be Lebanon, where she had made contacts with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. As she stood at the airport about to leave the only country she had ever known, only a single comrade from the Red Army faction arrived to bid her goodbye. Toyama Mieko, Shigenobu's closest friend and an essayist for the faction, walked up to her departing companion. They embraced, and with tears in her eyes, Toyama expressed her fears for Shigenobu's future safety in a faraway land. Then they said their farewells. Neither would ever meet the other again. For her part, Shigenobu Fusako would not return to Japan for many decades. Her name would soon become infamous worldwide. Toyama Mieko would remain in Japan. Within the year, she would be dead, murdered by her own comrades. With the troublesome Shigenobu gone, Mori was now uncontested leader of the Red Army faction in Japan. Yet he still faced many pressing issues. Following the hijacking incident, the faction's star was on the rise, with more and more radical youth hoping to join up. However, the clandestine nature of the organization, as it now existed, made large-scale organizing difficult. What's more, the Red Army faction, although flush with cash from their various bank robberies, lacked the tool that Mori most needed to take his army's action to the next level: guns. Sure, his research team had developed some effective incendiaries, and there were always the staves and clubs used by militant protesters across the country. But firearms, made extremely hard to come by with Japan's stringent gun control laws, were truly what any army worthy of the name needed.
So when I was in Idaho last week, and I did this talk at a bar in front of like a room full of conservatives, and they asked me all these questions about socialists, and it was really great, but what conservatives like to do in that environment is they like to ask questions like in a way that like they're owning the libs, right? So they would ask things like, well, the question I'm thinking of, I'll just be direct about it, is like one of the questions they asked me is like, well, are the socialists armed? Do they have guns? And so I had to explain to the conservatives, who are, by the way, convinced that people on the left don't buy guns, don't own guns, don't know how to use guns. I don't know where they thought all the gun purchases were coming from in 2020 when all of a sudden there was a massive skyrocket in the number of people purchasing guns for the first time. But socialists have gun clubs, guys. Like, they do. Socialists have gun clubs. Socialists have entire training events for guns. Gabrielle Clark, who's a activist against gender ideology in Texas, she talks about how when the left shows up to protest in Texas, they're wearing AR-15s.
Luckily, Mori knew of another radical student group which just so happened to have recently pulled off a successful robbery of a gun store. He decided to reach out to the leader of the Keihin Anpo Kyoto, the Keihin Anti-Security Treaty Joint Struggle Group. Keihin Anpo Kyoto had managed to become notorious amongst the police of Japan. Compared to the faction, they were known to be more nationalistic, directing most of their attacks against American military facilities. However, much like the faction, they had been driven underground by police surveillance, with many from amongst their leadership stuck whiling away their days in jail cells. Much as Mori had found himself in charge as those above him were removed from the picture, so had 27-year-old Nagata Hiroko found herself among the top brass of Keihin Anpo Kyoto. Nagata Hiroko had a very different leadership style from Mori, more inclined to yell and berate her followers. While her position in the organization stemmed from the more egalitarian nature of Keihin Anpo Kyoto, where women revolutionaries were generally treated the same as their male counterparts, whereas the Red Army faction had often relegated the women in the ranks to mere support positions, she held very firm ideals regarding gender and sex within the context of radical activism. Any couples caught fraternizing were punished for diverting their gaze from the all-encompassing revolution. Regardless of any factional differences, the fact was that Keihin Anpo Kyoto needed the Red Army's faction's money and notoriety, and the faction in turn needed Keihin Anpo Kyoto's store of guns and grenades. Mori and Nagata agreed to bring the two organizations together and in the process create a new composite revolutionary group. On July 15th, 1971, the United Red Army, or the URA, officially came into existence. Growing pains were present in the new organization from the very start, and one of the first orders of business on Nagata's docket was to set the tone for the internally directed violence for which the URA would become infamous. Two members of the Keihin Anpo Kyoto, 21-year-old Heiki Yasuko and her ex-boyfriend, 20-year-old Mukayama Shigenori, had recently deserted, an act Nagata found completely unacceptable. She would soon show the two what armies did to their deserters. In August, only weeks after the formation of the URA, a group of organization soldiers were sent to the deserter Heiki Yasuko's school dormitory. Entering her room, they attempted to convince her that her former boyfriend, Mukayama, had returned to the cause and wanted to see her. Sensing a trap, she refused to believe them. After some more attempts at baiting her failed, the group turned more aggressive, eventually forcing her out of her room and into a waiting car. Her body was later found in a shallow grave in the Imba Marsh in neighboring Chiba Prefecture. Mukayama would meet a similar fate some weeks later. One of his former comrades, Otsuki Setsuko, was sent to his apartment as a honeypot. She convinced him to go out drinking with her. She encouraged Mukayama's heavy drinking as she talked of her personal loneliness, and then led him to the apartment of one of their mutual friends from the movement. Once inside, Otsuki stepped out for some air. In her place, several larger Keihin Anpo Kyoto members entered. Suddenly aware that he'd been set up, Mukayama tried to fight his way out, but was eventually overwhelmed. He too was forced into a car where the people he had once considered friends choked him to death with a length of rope. His body was found buried in the same marsh. He'd been placed in a grave near that of Heiki Yasuko. Mori had agreed with Nagata to have these deserters killed. Unlike Nagata, however, Mori had previously failed to have similar deserters from the Red Army faction murdered. Mori began to fear being seen as the weaker half of the organization. He decided to take the reins of leadership by organizing a training camp at a hideaway deep in the mountains of Gunma that his faction had previously made use of. There, key members of the terrorist cells and the public civilian face of the United Red Army could train, plan, and, most importantly, engage in mutual self-criticism to strengthen the group's ideological precision and zeal.
Mutual self-criticism. Instead of calling it a struggle session, they called it mutual self-criticism. Wow.
The sort of group self-criticism Mori had in mind has long been practiced by various Japanese corporations, and had become quite common amongst Japanese New Left groups who called the process soukatsu. Operations, once completed, would become the subject of group discussion, where criticism of others and of oneself was used to find whatever weaknesses had led to any form of failure. During the planning of the next operation, they would then seek to overcome whatever internal problems had been discovered. Within
it's like a
leftist
legit
groups, any
process,
such
but-
failures were often viewed as ideological errors. However, as the United Red Army was forced farther underground and group interaction became limited, criticism increasingly became aimed towards the personal weaknesses of individual members rather than failures of group ideology. In the first days of December 1971, 29 people, consisting of 19 men and 10 women, made their way to the Sangaku Base Lodge deep in the mountainous, rural Gunma Prefecture. Among them were the two joint leaders, Mori and Nagata, as well as Nagata's husband, Sakaguchi Hiroshi, and Shigenobu Fusako's friend, Toyama Mieko. Bondo Kunio, a 20-year-old member of the Red Army faction known for his organizational skill, was also among those gathered.
They all look so old.
Training commenced. Amidst the study of ideology and strategizing for future revolutionary action, there was also time for the daily chores of group life in the freezing cold of the snow-covered mountains. The cutting of trees for firewood, the procuring of stores, the cooking of food. At night, the self-criticism sessions would begin. At first, criticism was leveled by the former Keihin members towards those from the Red Army. In all but name, the two groups were still far from united. Red Army members would then return critical fire. Those who were targeted for special deficiencies in action or resolve were allotted punishments during which they were to reflect on the true meaning of revolution. Exactly what this meant, or how it would be achieved, was completely unspecified. Long bouts of fasting or coerced periods of sitting in the cramped seiza position were common punishments, with Mori and Nagata serving as arbiters, deciding who had accomplished the proper ideological breakthroughs that would allow them rest. By the 20th, the continued disunity of those present convinced Mori and Nagata that harsher punishments were needed to instill the right revolutionary fervor. It all began with Ozaki Mitsuo. At 21 years old, the Tokyo University of Fisheries student had joined the United Red Army as a part of the merger with Keihin Ampo Kyoto. The crimes for which he stood accused by his fellow comrades during the self-criticism session were of discussing the whereabouts of Red Army hideouts and weapon stashes with unauthorized persons. Additionally, he was seen as lacking the correct amount of revolutionary zeal. Mori's corrective punishment for these offenses was to have Ozaki face off in a no-holds bout with a much bulkier co-revolutionary.
They had
The
a fight?
others encircled the two fighters, ensuring Ozaki could not run away, and then the larger man began wailing on Ozaki. Beaten to the ground
No.
time and again, Ozaki, bloodied, still rose for more punishment. He knew the only way out was to accept his physically imposed chastisement. Finally, the badly beaten Ozaki was allowed some rest. He then made a fatal mistake. He thanked Mori for the chance to allow himself to become a better revolutionary. There was murmuring from the surrounding group. Was Ozaki trying to flatter his way out of his proper training? Surely this represented more spiritual weakness on his part. The solution was to have Ozaki spend the night standing at attention outside in the mountainous sub-zero temperatures. After some hours of this, Ozaki, shaking and injured, asked to be allowed to lay down. This was the last straw. Did his weakness know no bounds? He was brought back into the warmth of the lodge only to face another intense beating. His comrades then carried Ozaki's broken body back outside, where he was tied to a post that, in lieu of ideological metal, would keep him standing. He hung there for hours and hours as his comrades ignored his increasingly weak cries for help. Occasionally, members were sent out to beat him yet again. By next morning, he was dead. Incredibly, this somehow came as an utter shock to most involved.
Wow.
After all, they were supposed to be helping the youth become a better revolutionary, not kill him. The air became tense and confused as the news spread, but Mori stepped in to explain that they had not, in fact, murdered one of their own. Rather, Mori said Ozaki had chosen to die. He had known the faults in his own psychology and knew that he would only bring the revolution down as a result of his own weakness. He had thus
They didn't beat him to death when he was tied to a pole. He chose to die. Holy shit.
not died of exposure or of ruptured internal organs, but rather of haibokushi, death by defeatism. His death was not something to mourn, but to celebrate. Those assembled were to take heart. The methods of the revolutionary self-criticism were clearly working. Ozaki had helped make the movement stronger by his death. As the days went by in the snowy lodge in the mountain, the self-criticism sessions continued apace. The murder of Ozaki, much less than a cause to halt and reconsider the group's action.
I know you mean well, but no, I don't, because the thing that I focus on, this is an exception of a day. The thing that I focus on is what socialists are doing in the real world. I do not need to read anyone. The only thing we really do here is watch what socialists do in the real world. We're just taking a break today because it's hard to watch what socialists do in the real world every day, but that's what we do. So I appreciate the suggestion, but I want to explain why I'm not going to do it.
Instead spurred them on, becoming just the first of many such horrifying incidents. Next came the murder of Shindo Ryuzaburo, accused of using the revolution for his own licentious gain by flirting with female members of the Red Army. His death came in much the same way as Osaki's. Then came the murders of Kato Yoshitaka and Kojima Kazuko. The two were punished for various infractions. Kato for disclosing information to the police when arrested, and Kojima for experiencing emotional turmoil, seen as
experiencing emotional
after
turmoil.
having been involved in the previous murder of the deserters Mukayama and Heiki. When their punishments of continuous seiza and fasting proved ineffectual.
This is a good point, Sin. Once they kill the first one, it's easier to kill the second one, and then the third one, and then the fourth one after that.
The beatings commenced. Kato's two younger brothers, both URA members who had joined the movement out of idealization of their older sibling, felt they had no other choice but to join in.
They had his siblings do it? Yo.
During the course of these, both the accused began to admit to other crimes, perhaps hoping to show remorsefulness and to demonstrate that they were gaining something from the training they were being put under. Both began to admit the various sexual liaisons they had engaged in. To Mori, this represented something of a breakthrough for the two, but it was still not enough. He had both Kato and Kojima tied out in the freezing cold, near where the other victims had already perished. Kojima died during the night. Kato, however, was found beating his head bloody against the pole to which he was tied in an apparent act of self-reflection for his crimes. Celebrated for his breakthrough, Kato was brought inside to rest.
Oh, so
Yet,
he beat himself
he would
so he
not
got out of
rise
it.
Again.
Wow.
When Kojima's body was found the next morning, eyes frozen open, Mori saw her death not as a glorious selfless suicide like Ozaki's, but somehow as a form of defiance. Her unseeing eyes seemed to mock him for his attempt at reform. Nagata, agreeing with her co-leader, became increasingly irate. Back in the cabin, the barbaric self-criticism went on. Discussion turned to the topic of Kojima's defiant, counter-revolutionary death. Nagato and Mori asked Toyama Mieko, who not long before had bade farewell to Shigenobu Fusako as she flew off to the Middle East, how she felt about seeing Kojima die in such a way. Toyama was already wary of Nagata, who had been fiercely critical of Toyama's perceived femininity in the past. Nagata had once publicly berated her for brushing her hair during a meeting. Toyama also knew that Nagata found her means of coming to the movement, taking the place of her boyfriend, a longtime revolutionary when he had been imprisoned, to be one that showed little commitment to the ideals of the cause. She had no choice. Toyama Mieko, whose understanding of doctrine was great enough to have ensured herself a position of essay writer for the cause, insisted in no uncertain terms that she craved more than anything to become a true revolutionary. Yet, in a moment of weakness, she also admitted that she was horribly afraid to die. The same girl who had cried at her friend's departure to faraway dangerous lands, who had just watched her own comrades murder 3 of their own, stood shaking. More weakness, decided Nagata and Mori. Nagata also voiced her suspicion that Toyama had been sexually involved with another member present, one Namekata Masatoki. Despite Namekata's long, self-sacrificing record of imprisonment for violent revolutionary activism, in Mori and Nagata's eyes, they were both guilty of the sins of counter-revolutionary spirit and flesh. But perhaps there was a way for these two to prove themselves, Mori thought. A sickening form of logic had brought him to his next suggestion, that Toyama and Namekata proved their zeal by going out to the body of the defiant Kojima and stabbing the corpse of their former friend. The rest of what occurred that night and in the next few days devolves from here. The barbarity carried out by friend against friend, brother against brother, defies explanation and needs not be described here in excessive detail.
No, it's describing in
Needless to
excessive
say,
detail. I want to know the
Toyama and
detail.
Namekata did as they were told. It was not enough. Soon, both would be dead. As the days passed, the body count continuously increased and the methods of punishment and of killing became more and more sadistic. Mori would kill some personally. Others would actually ask to die.
What?
And yet, in between the torture and death,
Holy
daily
shit.
chores and training would still be carried out. Debates and discussion regarding the next revolutionary action were still had. In the end of the 29 United Red Army soldiers who gathered at the cabin in the mountains in early December, 12 were murdered, purged from the movement like so much unwanted chaff. Including the 2 former members who had been lynched earlier in August, the United Red Army had now murdered 14 of their own. When this massacre later came to light, the Japanese public was repulsed and appalled. Yet, the question remains. How could this have happened? This wasn't a purge carried out by some unfeeling government agency in the USSR of the Stalinist era upon strangers they knew nothing of. A group of like-minded comrades, who despite some organizational differences were ostensibly friends, and who had in many cases known each other for years, engaged in the group murder and torture of their own co-revolutionaries. No one spoke up. No one tried to prevent it from happening in anything but tacit ways. Can complete, fervent, radical devotion to a cause really be the answer as to why these horrific killings took place?
Yes.
Various answers have been given, some relating to the managerial style of the United Red Army and the cultural realities of Japanese groups. The vertical nature of the organization meant that no one was willing to go directly against the leaders of the group, even as the deaths began, and those who disagreed with such methods used traditional Japanese indirection to do so, expressing opposition by silence and withdrawal, in the words of researcher Patricia Steinhoff. However, the revolutionary nature of the movement necessitated active engagement and enthusiasm for the cause, and these culturally ingrained actions of withdrawal were then in turn deemed to be revolutionary weakness, resulting in more violence. Less culturally essentialist readings do exist, of course. After all, the vast majority of other radical Japanese leftist groups never engaged in similar levels of violence, especially against their own members. The Japanese public was just as mystified and disgusted by the purge as any other people would be. It is true, however, that once the violence began, and the members saw that their comrades were willing to beat and kill their own friends, that groupthink likely took hold. The only way to prevent one's own death was to actively and enthusiastically engage in the torture and punishment of others. That there was supposedly a just cause for it all, understood and enunciated by their leaders, likely acted as a balm against the rigors of the deep guilt they might otherwise feel. No matter the rationale, 14 people
Well, they
now
don't see
lay
each other
dead.
as humans.
The
So that
survivors,
makes
whether they
sense.
felt remorse or not, would soon pay for their crimes. The Japanese police force had not forgotten about the United Red Army during all of this. So many of the known radicals of the infamous leftist movement had suddenly disappeared from the urban spaces they usually occupied that it set off alarm bells for those officers charged with keeping tabs on them. The
Yeah.
police slowly began to move in,
Capitalism
collecting tips
caused
from
it.
villagers
Exactly.
who lived amongst the mountains of Gunma who spoke of young, shabby outsiders seen coming and going into the mountainous passes. Before long, the police had found one of the hideouts that had previously been in use by the radicals. Meanwhile, Mori and Nagata decided to take a trip to Tokyo for supplies, leaving Nagata's husband and second-in-command, Sakaguchi Hiroshi, in charge. Fearing that they had stayed in one place for too long, or perhaps feeling the need to flee from the specters of those they had helped murder, Sakaguchi made the executive decision to move the surviving members of the training camp to a new location. A likely cave was found. Calling Mori and Nagata to Tokyo to inform them of the change of locale, the two surprised Sakaguchi with a message of their own. Nagata had decided to leave him for Mori.
Women ruin everything.
Sakaguchi obediently assented to this new union and hung up the phone. As the group was setting up the cave for long-term habitation, some members noticed that a well-worn hiking path was nearby. Even more concerning, one member returned from a trip into town with a newspaper revealing that the police had recently found 2 of their former hideouts. While there were not yet reports of any dead bodies being found, Sakaguchi was shaken. He disbanded the camp and ordered his comrades to take flight. They would split up and attempt to find some other refuge. The remaining revolutionaries broke camp, and taking their belongings, including their guns, ammunition, and grenades, set off on foot into the snowy mountain passes that bridge Gunma and Nagano Prefecture. In his haste, Sakaguchi forgot to find a phone with which to call and inform Mori and Nagata of his decision to flee. The very next day, February 17th, Mori and Nagata were driving to their recently abandoned cave, where they believed they would still be able to meet their underlings. Yet as they neared the site, the two were startled to see a police vehicle parked nearby. The officer on patrol noticed the approaching car and walked over to investigate. Mori rolled down the window, and the policeman asked who the couple were, and what they were doing this far out into the mountain range. Using a planned alibi, they replied that they were actors on their way to the shooting location for a new film. The patrolman seemed convinced enough and advised that they leave the area. The two thanked him and began driving away. But anxious to find out what had befallen their comrades, Mori and Nagata decided to turn around and reach the cave by another route. As luck would have it, the patrolman who had earlier encountered the two had moved to the same road. He was surprised to again see the couple he had just instructed to leave the area. His suspicions raised, he called for backup. As policemen emerged from the woods and surrounded the young radical leaders, Mori and Nagata pulled their knives and charged. Mori managed to knock over a policeman, stabbing at his chest, but the Kevlar jacket the officer wore prevented any major injury. The assembled police quickly subdued the two revolutionaries, pushing them to the ground and putting them into custody. Neither Mori nor Nagata would know freedom ever again. Their bloody reign had ended.
All right. Well, that's pretty much the end of that video. I think that this was like an interesting experience. Like, I think the big takeaway from today is that we need to somehow entice the socialist Marxist left in order to struggle session themselves, because they're never going to be the very best Marxists and communists they can be if they don't struggle session themselves. And we need to get them to struggle session themselves until they literally kill each other. Not that I agree with violence. I don't agree with murder. No one should kill each other. No one should murder anyone. But if we can get them all worked up into a frenzy to try to out-communist each other, I just think that our hands are clean. All we need to do is we just need to get them in a room. We need to create some sort of game show competition. What was that fucking what was that game show, like that Netflix thing where they killed everyone? Like you had to, like everyone had to die in order for one person to win money. The Squid Game, was that it? What, like something like the Squid something? We need to do that, but with communists and struggle sessions. Squid Game. Yes, Squid Game. All right, guys, that's all we have for today. I will be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. As a reminder, we are doing a community Zoom call right now. And if you would like to join us for that community Zoom call, what you do is you head over to my Substack, which is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com, and you go to this Unwoke Roundup email, which is right in the middle of the page right now, and you scroll all the way down to the bottom. And underneath this red box, when you are a supporter of my work for $8 a month or $80 a year, you get access to my community Zoom call links. They are in there. I will be posting the community Zoom call to locals for supporters there in a moment. And that's all I have for right now, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one. We'll see you soon. Bye.